And welcome back, Pete, from that break. We are here in the JJ Zone. Join the Journey Radio today, talking about what compatibility really is. It just amazes me that most singles have this. We have the deal breaker list, right? It's like these are the things. If you don't have these things on the list, it's a deal breaker, and it's not gonna. No way. There's gonna be any relationship between you and me. You gotta have these things, right? It's like there's a deal breaker list, which is fine. I mean, that everybody has it. That there's nothing wrong with having a deal breaker list. Uh, some people have a deal breaker list that is so incredibly long. It's like no wonder you're single. It's like you basically have because every item you put on this list, it's like okay, so there's a certain percentage of the population that you're removing from consideration, right? So then your probability of success goes down the more items you have on this deal breaker list. So, you know, some people's lists are so long that they've reduced their probability of success down to next to nothing. And then they wonder why it is that, they're still single. It's like, well, no wonder you're still single. You've basically, priced yourself out of the market. You've basically said, look, it isn't going to work unless I have, A through Z, when really all you need is H, K, and Q. Really, that's all you really need. But, for whatever reason, that's a topic we can talk about later, right? I mean, we can address that at a different time, a different episode of Join the Journey Radio. Today, I want to talk about compatibility, right? You get this idea, but this plays into the compatibility thing, right? This whole laundry list thing of having all these deal breakers. It plays into compatibility. Because if you think that compatibility is all about, the match, and I talked about this in the monologue, the match that you have with this ideal companion, then, you're going to be disappointed. First of all, you're disappointed because you're expecting things from other people, right? Every time you expect things from other people, you're going to be disappointed because people are imperfect. So you're walking through life with this, conception of perfection and never finding it because everybody's imperfect. I mean, if everyone's imperfect, you're not going to find the perfect person in a group of imperfect people. It's just, I mean, hell, everyone's imperfect. So how are you going to find perfection when everyone's imperfect? We need to clarify our thinking here. Compatibility is not about finding the perfect candidate. Okay. Compatibility has nothing to do with matching your ideal of what the ideal candidate would be. It's not about perfection, it's about good enough. You need good enough. Now, a lot of people will balk at that, especially women. Women don't like that idea because the natural woman, let's clarify this. The natural woman, the covenant woman's okay with good enough. The natural woman is not. The natural woman says, I got to have top shelf. I got to have the absolute best, and nothing but the best will do. And settling for second place is a recipe for misery. I mean, if I settle for anything less than the absolute best, then I'm going to be miserable forever. This makes sense when you use the emotional logic that governs the thinking processes of the natural woman, right? Because it's all about feeling, it's all about emotion. Only the best will produce the new experience with desired emotion that the natural woman is going after. And anything less than the best won't produce that. So, again, we've talked about this before on the program. The emotional equivalent of making sense is feeling good. So you feel the way you want to feel, then that's good, and that's what we go after, right? That is validated with emotional logic. But if it doesn't make you feel the way you want to feel, then it's not good, and we want to stay away from it. So we accept what makes us feel good. We reject what doesn't make us feel good. That's emotional logic. And so a lot of women are going to have a hard time with, you know, this whole thing about, because the idea of compatibility, matching your ideal, that's really aligned with this emotional logic that the natural woman uses to make decisions regarding her dating. It matches it, right? Because if you match the ideal, you make me feel the way I want to feel, then we're compatible. Then we're good. You're validated. You, you got the thumbs up. But if you don't, then you're not. It matches it so well. And yet, it doesn't match up with the intellectual logic, right? I mean, truth that we get from the spirit, you know, it makes sense in both realms. It makes sense in the head, the intellectual logic, but also makes sense in the heart, right? It makes sense in the heart and the head. So it works both ways here. And this idea of compatibility being this match with an ideal companion just doesn't cut the mustard when you look at it through the lens of intellectual logic, which is what the natural man uses. Men naturally process their thinking with intellectual logic. This is why we don't understand each other, right? This is why men and women have problems communicating, have problems interacting with each other, because the woman's looking through everything through the lens of emotional logic. The man's looking at everything through the lens of intellectual logic. And if we learn how to think like the other thinks, we could see how compatible we really are with each other, right? Instead of getting all these crazy notions about what compatibility really is, you know, when you just matching with the ideal, that's not compatibility because it doesn't make intellectual sense. Because as I said before, everyone's imperfect. Everyone is imperfect. So you're never going to find the perfect companion amongst everyone who's imperfect. There's always going to be something, quote unquote, wrong with the other person, which again gets back to what I was saying before. You just need good enough. You just need good enough. I mean, modern day prophets and apostles have repeatedly taught this concept that the perfect spouse, the perfect companion, is the imperfect person who will work with you to, help the both of you, proceed and journey together towards perfection. That's the perfect companion. So really what you're looking at is not perfect. What you're really looking at is good enough. And this is what come back to that definition I was giving in the monologue about what true compatibility really is. True compatibility is an alignment of values and life direction. You know, when your values are aligned, when you place value on the same things, and it didn't have to be exactly the same, but it's more or less in the same order. You have the same sort of priorities of what you're doing, and you're going in the same direction. You're you're both wanting to head and take your lives in the same general direction. Now, again, there may be you may not be perfectly aligned with that, but the general direction of where you want to take your life and what you want to actually leave behind you as far as a legacy goes, you have alignment there. This is compatibility. And yet, too often, because we're off in this, realm of thinking compatibility is something that it's really not, that bleeds in to the way we approach dating. And of course, we've talked about so many times here on this program, if what's up here in your head isn't right, if your thinking is not right, you're not going to take the actions that will give you the results that you really want. Because thinking leads to action, action leads to results, results help to create the reality that you have in life. So if things aren't working for you, you need to go back, go back to the start, and think about, like, how are you thinking about things? If you're thinking that compatibility is this match with an ideal, then everything is going to be centered around looking for that ideal. And the moment you find something that says, okay, this person's not ideal, okay, drop them, deal breaker, Danger, Will Robinson, danger! Aliens approaching. I mean, it's just you're just going to drop them out, and then because everybody's imperfect, eventually everyone you consider is just going to keep dropping out. You're not going to get anywhere. Whereas if you're looking for someone who shares your values and is trying to take their life in an interesting place, a place that you want to go to, is creating a life that you want to share. Well, now that's much more interesting. That's much more intriguing, and your probability of success is much higher with that. Because looking at it with got to match my ideal. Well, okay, nobody's going to match your ideal. Nobody, because we're all imperfect. But there may be a group of people out there who do share the same values that you have, and who are trying to make something out of themselves in their lives. So your probability of success is actually increased by taking on the right thinking, because the right thinking will feed the right approach. You'll take more effective action, which leads to more effective results, which gives you more effective reality. It's really no more complicated than that. We're coming to a break, so let's go and take that break. And when we come back from the break, I want to explore more about this connection between the way we think about compatibility and how it bleeds into the way that we approach dating and how we can leverage that, because it's operating whether or not we realize it's operating whether or not we understand it. But if we understand it, if we can realize what's going on and understand how the connections work, then we can leverage that so that we actually get more of the results that we want, and we actually have more joy in our journey. So we'll talk about that on the other side. See you there.